It was a cold night in New York City. The city pulsed with lights, but the harsh winter made the streets feel deserted. Jack Carter, a man of elegant stature and unwavering confidence, stood in front of the mirror in his luxurious apartment, dressing meticulously. He adjusted his perfectly aligned tie and ran a hand through his neatly combed hair. His attire was impeccable, a reflection of the man he had become. A renowned businessman celebrated for his vision and determination. He paused, studying his reflection with a mix of pride and restrained emotion. "I deserve this. I fought hard to get here," he murmured to himself, a faint smile gracing his lips. It was a moment of personal acknowledgement, a rare instance where he allowed himself to celebrate his achievements without losing sight of the scars that had shaped him. Grabbing his heavy coat, he adjusted the watch on his wrist, took a deep breath, and headed for the door. Each step to the building's entryway echoed with the confidence of a man who had earned his place in the world. But as he opened the front door to the bitter cold, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. A young boy huddled near the entrance. Jack stopped at the threshold, the icy wind hitting his face as his eyes settled on the boy sitting on the ground. The child's clothes were visibly worn, and a thin knit cap barely shielded his small ears from the freezing air. He had large, alert eyes that lifted toward Jack as he noticed his presence. "Sir, could you spare $2? The boy asked, his voice trembling from both the cold and his shyness. "I just wanted to get a hot chocolate. It's so cold out here." For a moment, Jack remained still, his eyes taking in the child before him. He was small and frail, yet there was a resilient expression on his face, as though he was no stranger to hardship. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice softer than he had expected. "What are you doing out here in this cold? Shouldn't you be at home?" The boy lowered his gaze, embarrassed, pulling his knees tightly to his chest before answering. "At home, we don't have much. My mom tries, but sometimes it's hard. At least out here, people help me sometimes. They give me clothes, food, or a little money. When I get enough, I go back home to sleep." The boy's words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. Something stirred deep within him, an old memory he hadn't expected to revisit. The scene before him brought back echoes of his own childhood, a time when he and his mother struggled against poverty. Jack had lost his father at a young age, and his mother had worked tirelessly to provide the bare necessities for him. He looked at the boy again, but this time his eyes were filled with compassion, and something more, a sense of responsibility. Adjusting his coat, he leaned down slightly toward the child. "Look, I don't think it's right for you to stay out here. How about we do something different tonight?" The boy looked up at him with suspicion, but also a glimmer of curiosity. "Like what?" he asked, still hesitant. "I'm heading to a party, and there's plenty of food and drinks there. Soda, juice, hot chocolate, whatever you want. How about coming with me?" The boy's eyes lit up for a brief moment, but the wariness quickly returned. He glanced down at his clothes and mumbled, "I can't go like this. My clothes aren't good enough." Jack nodded, understanding his concern. "You're right, but we've got time. On the way, we can stop at a mall and get you something to wear." The boy bit his lower lip, clearly weighing his options. Life on the streets had taught him to assess people's intentions early on, and he could tell Jack wasn't a bad man. Finally, with a sigh, he said, "You know what? I've got nothing to lose. I might never get another chance like this." A faint smile appeared on Jack's lips. He motioned for the boy to stand up. "Great. What's your name?" "Ethan." "Well, Ethan, I'm Jack. Let's make sure this is a night you'll never forget." Jack and Ethan walked together toward the car, a sleek black sedan that looked even more impressive under the glow of the streetlights. Ethan hesitated before getting in, eyeing the pristine leather seats as if afraid he might ruin them. "Go ahead. It's fine," Jack said, holding the door open for him. Still wary, Ethan slid into the seat. His curious eyes wandered over the luxurious interior as the car began to move. The initial silence was broken by Jack, who tried to make the situation more comfortable. "So, Ethan, what's your favorite kind of hot chocolate?" The boy thought for a moment before answering, as if he were being tested. "The regular kind, with marshmallows if possible." Jack smiled at the simplicity of the response. Despite Ethan's difficult circumstances, there was something childlike and genuine in his words, a reminder of how childhood was meant to be. When they arrived at the mall, the automatic doors slid open to reveal the warmth and glow of Christmas decorations. Lit-up trees, shimmering wreaths, and store windows filled with gifts created a stark contrast to the cold and darkness outside. Ethan froze for a moment, his eyes wide, taking in every detail. "Wow," he murmured, unable to hide his amazement. Jack placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him to the nearest clothing store. There, Ethan initially seemed out of place, glancing awkwardly at racks full of elegant clothes. Jack quickly took the lead, picking out a shirt, a pair of pants, and a coat. "Let's see how this looks," he said, handing the pieces to Ethan. The boy hesitated before entering the fitting room, as if he still couldn't believe any of this was real. A few minutes later, the curtains slid open, revealing an entirely different Ethan. The blue shirt brought out his eyes, the coat gave him a touch of sophistication, and the shy smile on his face was the perfect finishing touch. "Well, what do you think?" Ethan asked, stepping forward. Jack looked him over with a nearly paternal gaze and replied with a smile, "You look amazing, like you could be part of the royal family." Ethan let out a short laugh and, breaking the ice, joked, "I even washed my armpit for this moment." The two burst into laughter, and for a brief moment, the gap in age and reality between them seemed to disappear. Before leaving, Jack stopped at another store to pick up a few extra gifts for Ethan, masking his intent to surprise him. With Christmas approaching, Jack suspected the boy wouldn't be receiving any presents. Once they were done, Jack checked his watch. "All set. Now we can head to the party. Ready?" Ethan nodded, a sparkle of excitement in his eyes. He had never worn such nice clothes or been in a place as welcoming as that mall. For the first time in a long while, he felt like something good was happening in his life. Jack and Ethan arrived at the party venue, a luxurious hall in the heart of Manhattan. The building's exterior sparkled with festive lights. High-end cars pulled up at the entrance, and elegantly dressed guests stepped out, some holding wrapped gifts, others exchanging warm smiles. Ethan looked around as if he had stepped into a movie. "This place is huge," the boy said, clutching his new coat a little tighter. Jack gave him a reassuring smile and placed a hand on his shoulder. "And it's going to be fun. Trust me." As they stepped inside, the warm air and the mouth-watering aroma of delicious food immediately enveloped Ethan. The hall was breathtaking. Chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, and finely decorated tables were laden with appetizers and desserts. A grand Christmas tree adorned with sparkling ornaments dominated the center of the room. As soon as they entered, a young woman in an elegant pantsuit approached, holding a tablet in her hand. "Mr. Carter, it's good to see you," she greeted him, her tone both professional and friendly. Her eyes briefly landed on Ethan, but she asked no questions. "Thank you, Claire. This is Ethan, my special guest. I want you to make sure he feels comfortable. Show him where he can eat, drink, and play. He's the king of the party tonight." Claire offered a warm smile to the boy. "Of course, Ethan. Are you ready to eat as much as you want?" Ethan nodded shyly, but the idea of unlimited food already made his eyes sparkle. "Go with her," Jack said, encouraging him. "Enjoy yourself." Ethan was led to a special area of the hall set up just for kids. It was like a world of its own, with toys, games, and even a Santa Claus taking pictures with the children. Ethan hesitated at first, but was soon swept up in the excitement. He started exploring, piling a plate high with food before running off to play with the other kids. Meanwhile, Jack watched from a distance, a faint smile on his face. Seeing Ethan so happy brought him a sense of satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. It was as if he were glimpsing a part of himself in the boy, a part he had lost along the way, buried under the struggles and responsibilities of adulthood. Some time later, Jack ordered a glass of wine and sat at one of the nearby tables, keeping Ethan in his line of sight. As the evening progressed, he watched the boy laugh, run, and eat as if the entire world belonged to him. The sight was both heartwarming and inspiring. "Mr. Carter," Claire said, approaching again, "the boy seems to be having a wonderful time." "He deserves it," Jack replied, his eyes never leaving Ethan. As the party began to wind down and the guests started to leave, Ethan returned to Jack. His face was flushed from playing, and his eyes sparkled with gratitude. "This was the best night of my life, but I need to go home now. My mom should be getting back from her second shift any minute. And if I'm not there, she'll be worried," he said, holding a dessert in his hand like it was a trophy. Jack smiled, feeling proud that he had done something so simple yet so meaningful. "I can't let you go home alone in this cold. I'll drive you." As Jack drove through the quiet, snow-covered streets, Ethan sat in the passenger seat, unable to contain his excitement. He gazed out the window at the Christmas lights adorning houses and storefronts, but his mind lingered on the magical evening he had just experienced. "Thank you so much, Jack. I've never had this much fun in my whole life. Earlier today, I saw Santa Claus in the park, and I told him, it'd be great if you could make something good happen in my life. I'm so tired of all the struggles and problems. My life's been really hard ever since my dad left my mom to be with another woman. He told us he doesn't want anything to do with us now that he has another family, and we've been on our own ever since. I try to be strong for my mom, but I'm just a kid. I just asked for a little fun. And wow, he made my wish come true so fast. I can't believe it. At least for one night, I got to enjoy myself." Ethan's voice was sincere, tinged with emotion. Jack swallowed hard, feeling a heavy weight in his chest. He knew all too well what it was like to grow up without a father and to watch a mother sacrifice everything. But what moved him the most was the resilience with which Ethan faced his situation. "You deserve more than this, Ethan. You deserve a better life. And I'll do what I can to help." Ethan gave him a small but genuine smile. To him, those words meant more than any gift or food he had received that evening. When they arrived at Ethan's home, the boy pointed to a small, worn-down building. The lights were off, except for a faint glow in the hallway. Jack parked the car, and Ethan reached out to shake his hand in thanks. "Thank you for bringing me home. My mom should be back from work soon." It was then that Jack's eyes caught something on Ethan's wrist. A simple bracelet with a hollowed-out star charm. He froze. "Ethan," Jack said, his voice suddenly low and hoarse. "Can I see that bracelet?" Ethan frowned, surprised by the request, but held out his arm. Jack took the bracelet carefully, as if he were handling something fragile and precious. His eyes fixed on the charm, noticing the tiny, imperfect engraving of an initial. His heart raced. "Where did you get this?" Jack asked, his breath hitching. "It was my mom's," Ethan replied. "She said she got it from a friend when she was a kid. She always tells stories about him. I think they were really close." Jack stood frozen, staring at the small charm on Ethan's bracelet. He held it so delicately, as if afraid the mere touch might make it vanish. Memories from his childhood crashed over him like an unstoppable wave. He remembered when he was young, living on the streets. He had met a girl named Emily. They were both simple kids, finding joy in the smallest things despite their hardships. Together, they turned their struggles into grand adventures. Everything in their lives became a game, and they promised each other they would never part. One day, during one of their street escapades, Jack stumbled upon a pair of bracelets on the ground. Each had a star charm, one was hollow, and the other was the piece that fit perfectly inside it. Jack picked them up and rushed home. He grabbed a tool that had belonged to his father, one used to mark belongings, and engraved their initials into the charms. Secretly, he loved Emily. It was a pure and innocent love, but when he tried to carve his own initial, his hand trembled, leaving a tiny imperfection on the letter. It's not perfect, he had thought, but I think she'll like it. He found an old gift box in one of his mother's drawers and carefully wrapped the bracelets. The next day, while they were playing, he asked Emily to close her eyes and hold out her hands. She did, and he placed the gift in her palms. "Open your eyes," he said with a nervous smile. Emily opened her eyes and lit up with joy. She asked if the gift was really for her, and Jack nodded. She noticed the initial charm and realized it was his. Jack then showed her his bracelet. She connected the two charms and said, "Now we're complete. We'll be friends forever. No one will ever separate us." She gave him a kiss on the cheek, making Jack the happiest boy in the world. They continued their adventures as if nothing could ever break their bond. A few months later, Emily's family decided to move. Life had become too hard in their small town, and they sought better opportunities in a bigger city. The two children, both crying, said their goodbyes. Emily took Jack's mother's phone number with her, and Jack held on to the hope of seeing her again someday. But that day never came. They lost contact, and Jack never saw Emily again. The days that followed were lonely and painful, but over time he moved on. He dedicated himself to his studies, started his entrepreneurial journey at a young age, and eventually achieved the success he had always dreamed of. Now, standing there, Jack felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. It was impossible, yet everything fit perfectly. The bracelet was identical to the one he had given Emily all those years ago, even the tiny flaw where his hand had trembled. His voice shook when he finally managed to speak. "Ethan, your mom. Has she ever told you how she met this friend?" Ethan nodded, looking at Jack with curiosity. "She says they were inseparable. They did everything together. But one day her family had to move, and she lost his number. I guess they never found each other again." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process everything. He could still hear Emily's laughter in his mind, still see the joy on her face when he gave her the bracelet with the charm he had engraved with his trembling hands. "And she never mentioned his name?" Jack asked, almost afraid of the answer. "I'm not sure. I think she did," Ethan replied, pausing to think. "It was Jack, I think. Like your name." Jack nearly dropped the bracelet. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions. Could it really be possible that after all these years, fate had brought their paths together again? "Ethan, can you take me to her?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I really need to see her." The boy frowned, confused, but eventually nodded. "Okay, but she works a lot. I don't think she's back from her second shift yet." Jack looked at the simple entrance of the building and made a decision. "I'll wait. I don't care how long it takes." Ethan opened the door and invited him inside. The apartment was small but clearly made with love and effort to feel like a home. A makeshift Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with simple ornaments and faintly blinking lights. Jack noticed Emily's determination to maintain some holiday spirit for Ethan, even with limited resources. He sat on the couch as Ethan fetched a blanket to keep warm. The boy returned and plopped into a chair nearby, exhausted but happy. "Do you think my mom will be happy to see you?" Ethan asked, his tone tinged with doubt. Jack gave him a soft smile, though his heart was racing. "I hope so. I have so many good memories with her." "Look at this," he said, pulling out his wallet. From it, he retrieved the matching charm, the piece that fit perfectly into Ethan's bracelet. Ethan gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief as he placed the star piece in the hollow charm on his wrist. "Clicked perfectly." "It's you!" Ethan exclaimed, his voice brimming with amazement. "You're my mom's best friend." "How? Oh my gosh. This is the best day of my life. She's not going to believe this." Time seemed to crawl. Every sound from the hallway made Jack hold his breath, straining to hear the jingle of keys in the lock. Finally, the long-awaited sound came. "Ethan!" A woman's voice called out as the door opened. Why are you still up? Jack stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the woman who had just walked in. She looked tired, her face marked by years of hard work, but her eyes still held the same sparkle he remembered from so long ago. When she lifted her gaze and saw him, she froze. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Emily, startled, looked at Ethan and asked, "Who is this man?" The boy ran to hug her and exclaimed, "Mom, you won't believe it. It's your childhood friend, the one who gave you the star bracelet. Look, he has the other piece." For a moment, the small apartment was completely silent. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her bag slipping off her shoulder as she tried to process what she was seeing. Her eyes darted between Jack and the bracelet in his hand, the link between her past and present feeling impossible yet undeniably real. "How did you find me?" she finally asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and emotion. Jack took a step forward, still holding the bracelet as if it anchored him to the moment. "I didn't find you, Emily. Fate did." Ethan looked back and forth between them, his face lighting up with a mix of curiosity and pride for being the connection that reunited them. "Mom, he took me to an amazing party today, and then he saw the bracelet on my wrist. Can you believe it? He has the other part." Emily was still stunned. She placed her bag on the table and took a few hesitant steps toward Jack. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said softly, almost a whisper. Jack smiled, a bittersweet expression, as he held her gaze. "I thought the same. All these years, I've wondered where you were." Emily shook her head, a whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "When we moved, I lost your mom's number. I tried so hard to reach out, but..." Jack raised his hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "I understand. Life pulled us apart, but now it's brought us back together." Emily let out a shaky sigh, and for the first time in years, allowed herself a genuine smile. Ethan watched them both, wide-eyed, as though he were witnessing a scene from a movie. "Would you like to sit?" she asked, still trying to recover from the shock. Jack nodded, and the two of them sat on the small couch while Ethan settled into the nearby armchair, watching everything intently. Jack began recounting how he had taken Ethan to the mall and the party, sparing no detail. "He's incredible, Emily. So smart, so resilient. I could see so much of you in him." Emily looked away for a moment, clearly moved. "I try my best," she said with a sigh, running a hand through her hair. "But it's hard. 2 jobs, overdue bills. I want him to have more than I ever did, but..." Jack placed a hand gently over hers, a simple yet deeply meaningful gesture. "Emily, you're already doing the impossible. Raising a boy like Ethan with so little, it's a miracle." She looked into his eyes, and in that moment, it felt as though no time had passed. There was something between them, an invisible thread that had never broken. Ethan, sensing the seriousness of their conversation, yawned and rubbed his eyes. "I think I'm going to bed, Mom. Today was amazing." "Thank you, Jack." Jack gave the boy a warm smile. "It was my pleasure, Ethan. Good night." When Ethan disappeared into his room, Emily turned to Jack, now more at ease but still filled with a million questions. "Jack, what happens now?" Jack was silent for a moment, carefully choosing his words. "Now, I don't want to lose touch again. I want to help you and Ethan. And not just because I can, but because... care. I always have." Snow was falling softly outside, blanketing the city in white as colorful Christmas lights twinkled in the distance. Emily still couldn't quite believe what was happening. With tears welling in her eyes and her heart racing, she looked at Jack, the childhood friend whom fate had brought back to her. This must be Christmas magic," Emily said, still trying to process everything. "Our words have power, Jack. And somehow, destiny found a way to bring us back together." Jack took a deep breath, as if summoning the courage for what he was about to say. His gaze was intense, filled with nostalgia and something deeper that Emily hadn't yet realized. Can I hug you?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, her heart warmed, and simply said, "Yes, of course you can." The hug was long and tight, as if they were trying to piece their souls back together after being separated for so long. The world around them seemed to stop. It was just the two of them and nothing else mattered. For hours they talked. Emily shared stories of the difficult years she had endured, working 2 jobs to support her son, Ethan. Jack listened intently, his eyes shining with emotion, and at times, indignation. "You don't have to go through this anymore, Emily," Jack said firmly, holding her hands. "I want to help you. Work with me. I know what you're capable of, and together we can achieve so much." "What?" Emily asked, surprised. "Jack, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," he insisted, smiling reassuringly. "You'll get a fair salary, you won't have to exhaust yourself with 2 jobs, and most importantly, I won't let you live like this anymore. You deserve better, much better." She brought her hands to her face, trying to hold back her tears. Her heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and relief. "Yes, I accept," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. Jack smiled, and before they parted ways, they exchanged phone numbers. Fate had already begun its work, but Christmas still had more surprises in store. On Christmas Eve, Jack made a special invitation. "Get ready, Emily. I want to take you somewhere. It's going to be special," he said, a mysterious sparkle in his eyes. Emily, unsure of what to expect, dressed in the best outfit she could find. When Jack arrived to pick her up, Ethan ran to his side, beaming with excitement. "Where are we going, Uncle Jack?" the boy asked, his eyes shining brightly. "You'll see, little champ," Jack replied, ruffling Ethan's hair with a warm smile. They went to an ice skating rink surrounded by Christmas lights that sparkled like stars. Jack taught Ethan how to skate while Emily watched the two of them laughing together. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized that Jack was becoming more than a friend. He was becoming family. After hours of fun, Jack took them to a cozy restaurant for a special dinner. The table was adorned with candles and a pine garland, and the air was filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. During dinner, Jack surprised Ethan with a remote-controlled car, the very one the boy had been dreaming of. The joy on Ethan's face was enough to fill Emily's heart with an indescribable warmth. "Thank you, Uncle Jack," the boy exclaimed, throwing his arms around him. "You're welcome, champ. You deserve it." But the most special moment of the evening was yet to come. After dinner, Jack brought them back to his luxurious apartment. It was elegant yet inviting, with a towering Christmas tree adorned with sparkling ornaments. The clock was nearing midnight, and Jack, looking at Emily, made a gentle request. "It's late. Stay here tonight. It's safer." She hesitated for a moment but soon relented, feeling that this was exactly where they belonged. Ethan quickly fell asleep in a cozy guest room, his face serene and content. When Jack returned to the living room, he found Emily standing by the large glass window, admiring the city lights twinkling below. He approached quietly, and when she turned around, she saw Jack holding a small blue velvet box. "For you," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a star-shaped pendant. "I've always known you were a star, Emily. You just needed to see it too." Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise and emotion. "Jack, it's beautiful. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied with a soft smile. "Just let me love you." Jack also held a bouquet of red roses, a symbol of a love that had never faded. He handed it to Emily, and she inhaled the sweet fragrance of the flowers. "I've never felt so loved in my life," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Except when I was a child, and you were by my side every day." Their eyes met, and something invisible yet powerful passed between them. No words were necessary. Jack walked over to his sound system, selected a soft, romantic song, and then returned to Emily, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "Dance with me," he whispered in her ear. She nodded, and they began to move slowly, swaying to the rhythm of the music. The world outside was a magical landscape of snow and stars, but nothing compared to what they felt inside. The room was lit only by the colorful lights of the Christmas tree and the soft glow from the snow-covered city below. The silence was filled with the sound of a slow, romantic song playing in the background. Emily and Jack stood together in the center of the room, swaying gently to the soft melody. Jack held her firmly, his hands resting protectively on her waist. Emily's fingers lightly touched his shoulders, but the warmth in her palms seemed to set her entire body alight. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling the woody scent of Jack's cologne mixed with the lingering aroma of roses in the air. "This reminds me of when we were kids," Emily whispered, resting her head against his chest. "When you used to say you'd protect me from everything." "I never stopped wanting to," Jack replied, his voice deep and tender. Emily lifted her gaze to his, and their eyes met. The entire world fell silent. There was no music, no sound from the city outside. It was just the two of them. Jack's eyes were deeper than she had ever seen, filled with a mix of longing, desire, and something she hadn't seen in a long time: love. Pure, true love, the kind that doesn't fade with the passing of years. "Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this?" he said, as his fingers gently rose to touch her face, caressing her cheek with his thumb. "I looked for you in every face I came across, but I never found anyone like you." Emily felt her heart race in her chest, his words striking her like a wave. Warm tears began to well up in her eyes, but she smiled. "And I thought I'd never see you again," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "Never, Emily," he said, his gaze falling to her lips. "Never." He leaned in slowly, without rush, waiting for a sign from her. Emily's eyes closed softly, a silent confirmation that this was the moment. Jack closed the distance between them, his movements deliberate. When his lips finally touched hers, it was gentle at first, tender, as if he feared breaking something fragile. But gradually, the kiss deepened, growing in intensity. Their lips fit together like puzzle pieces that had waited years to finally unite. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine as her hands instinctively moved to Jack's neck, pulling him closer. He responded by holding her tighter, as if shielding her from the entire world. The two were lost in their silent dance of lips, their hearts setting the rhythm. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the stars seemed to shine brighter. Inside the apartment, however, there was a warmth that no winter could extinguish. When the kiss ended, they both kept their eyes closed for a moment, their foreheads resting against each other, smiles on their faces and their breaths still uneven. "I knew it," Jack said with a tender smile. "I knew you were my destiny." Emily opened her eyes, and the light they reflected was as radiant as the stars outside. "And I knew that no matter how much time passed, you would always be my home." They smiled and, without saying another word, embraced again, swaying to the slow rhythm of the music. This time, there were no more doubts, no fears. It was love, and they knew that destiny had kept its promise. Years passed, and Emily's life transformed completely. With Jack's encouragement and support, she returned to school, graduated, and became his business partner. She was no longer the young woman juggling two exhausting jobs. She had become a strong, confident, and determined woman. Together, they built an empire. Emily thrived in the business world, proving she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. Jack was always by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner who encouraged her to shine on her own. Ethan grew up seeing Jack as the father figure he had always needed. He never felt alone, as he now had a real home. Years later, during a Christmas dinner, the family gathered once more. Emily, Jack, and Ethan looked back at their journey and saw that, No matter how difficult the path had been, destiny had always been at work. Who would have thought all this started with an unexpected reunion? Emily said, glancing at Jack. Sometimes all destiny needs is a chance, he replied, holding her hand. No luxury could surpass the feeling of being at peace with the ones you love. No matter what happens, we will always be together, Jack said, pulling them both into a warm embrace. And as the snow fell outside, Emily looked up at the starry sky and whispered softly, "Thank you, destiny, for never giving up on us